Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Everything Cooperative, this beautiful, beautiful Thursday morning in the great month of July. We have on the program with us this day Mr. Cornelius Blanding, the new executive director of the Federation of Southern Co-ops. He's been on the show before, and he's had a promotion since then. Good morning, Cornelius.
Good morning, Vernon. How are you, sir?
I'm great. How are you doing today?
I'm adjusting to the curveball.
Adjusting to the okay. Well, I hope you hit it out of the park, man.
Once I get adjusted, you can believe it.
Well, how has the transition been?
It's been a transition for sure. They say you don't know what you know until you don't know what you know. It's been a ride, but when I wouldn't trade in for anything, I tell you, I've been with the Federation for over 17 years now, and thought I knew the organization. But I tell you, until you get in this seat, you don't know it.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I have a whole lot of my predecessor, Mr. Ralph Page. I've always admired and had a great deal of respect for him, and I think I've learned to have even more. Just trying to see that.
Trying to fill his shoes, huh?
Yeah, well, I've given up on trying to do that. I realized those are large set of shoes, and I said, well, I'm gonna walk my own path.
Okay.
Put his shoes to the side to be reminded of the walk and the giants before me, and blaze my own trail based on the mission of this organization. But it's been a ride, and when I went trade in, because again, I learned a whole lot in the few months. It's only been about 4 months now since March.
4 months.
Yeah, 4 months, almost 5 months now. Yeah, so it's not long at all, but it seems like a lifetime now. I tell you.
Well, the Federation got started in the 60s?
1967, yes.
Okay, and has Ralph been the executive director ever since then?
He hasn't. I'm actually the third full executive director. Ralph is the second executive director. Ralph has been with that organization for about 46 years. The executive director for 30.
Okay.
Charles Prejean was actually the first executive director of the Federation.
So can you tell the audience what the Federation does, Federation of Southern Cooperatives?
I will be glad to. The Federation is like, and I say that, and I humbly say this, but it's like no other organization in this sense. First of all, just by our charter, the Federation is chartered in D.C., is under the Cooperative Development Act of D.C., and we were chartered that way because there was no such charter. There was and is no such charter in the South, like that and probably nowhere else. But we were chartered in 1967 by 22 co-ops that came together to create what they called the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. So in essence, we're a cooperative of cooperatives.
Mm-hmm.
Where we're structured, we're basically a secondary and tertiary cooperative. We have these primary cooperatives on the ground, these very community-based cooperatives that are in all the states throughout the South. And again, 22 of them came together to create the Federation. And those 22 were created out of the Civil Rights Movement. Well, many of them, some of them even before. But they came together because of a need, which what co-ops are set up to address, a need that was common among all of them, individual members and the cooperative members, and created this Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And the Federation was set up to basically address their needs as cooperatives and the members of those cooperatives. So I like to look at it in terms of three primary areas in terms of what the Federation works in, and that's cooperative economic development, land retention, and advocacy. And so in the cooperative development piece of it, which was important, is that it was about promoting, protecting, and defending the cooperative movement in the South and among these community-based cooperatives, and providing all the services and technical assistance they needed to survive as cooperatives and thrive and continue to grow and expand the cooperative movement. And there were a lot of people that was at the table. I mentioned the Federation was chartered in 1967, but it was before before 1967, before it was actually started in terms of the conversation. There were many people at the table. One of them, you in D.C. there, was CLUSA, the Credit Union League of the United States of America, which is now NCBA CLUSA. There were people from CLUSA at the table in '66 when these conversations were going on.
Mm-hmm.
The first piece of money came from OEO, the office from the government, to help establish the federation. That first meeting happened in Mississippi, but it took a year later, and from funding from various people and support from all different organizations and communities that culminated into the founding of the organization in '67. But again, around cooperative economic development, land retention, and advocacy. And the land retention piece is very important because at the end of the day, what I always heard that in order to have a successful business, you have to have land, management, and capital.
Go.
And so land is a very important part of what we do as a federation. It's a part of many of the cooperatives because we're here in the South, and the land base is the biggest asset that black families, black farmers, black landowners have here in the South. And protecting that asset, that land base, has been critical for our movement, for the cooperative movement here in the South, for the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And so we spend a lot of time around land retention, helping to save land here in the South because black families, black farmers, black landowners have been losing land at such an alarming rate that there was a commission created, and they thought by the year 2000 there would be no black-owned land if it kept going at the rate it was. So one of our primary purposes was to help stem the tide of land loss, and that's critical for us in terms of the cooperatives, again, because many of our cooperatives are agriculture-based, meaning they're land-based. And so making sure that that land is protected and making sure they're able to utilize that land. And the number one vehicle that we use for that is cooperatives, organizing cooperatives. And then you have advocacy in terms of always advocating for the right kind of programs and policies that will help, that will benefit small farmers, landowners, and these cooperatives in the South.
Economic development, money, land retention, money, advocacy, programs and policies that help create money and get land. In order to have a successful business, you said land, management, and capital. That's land, knowledge of how to run a business, and then the money to run the business.
Exactly.
All right. Well, you got how many? There were 22 to start. How many co-ops do you have now, or how many people are involved in your federation?
Yeah, well, there were 22 cooperatives then. There's about 75 now, cooperatives and credit unions and community development groups. And it involves roughly around 20,000 individuals all around the South.
And when you say all around the South, what states are you talking about?
So we're actually chartered in D.C., but we're chartered to work in, I think, 13 states, which go from Texas all the way up to Virginia. However, we're a very limited resource organization, so we know we can't cover that amount of territory. So we have board representation from 9 southern states, but we actually focus in 6. And those 6 that we focus are Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, Louisiana, Florida. And when I say focus, that's where we have physical staff offices. But again, other states like Texas, Arkansas, Missouri, those states are important to us too because again we have membership there, and we have cooperatives there. We provide services there. Again, no physical office, no staff, but we're working to grow every day.
Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, Louisiana, and Florida. You got physical offices in those locations.
Staff. Yes, sir.
75 cooperatives or credit unions with about 20,000 people. And when you say limited resources, you're talking about you don't have a whole lot of money to do all this programming and advocacy and economic development and land retention.
Exactly. So what I consider one of our major problems is this, and I say problem for lack of a better word. We're, again, a cooperative economic development organization, cooperative land retention and advocacy. One of our biggest supporters is actually, we have many supporters, so I don't want to leave anybody out, but the lion's share of our resources come from government programs. And most of the government programs don't work in those areas that I mentioned, cooperative Office of Economic Development, Land Retention, and Advocacy. However, there are some. Rural Development, as an example, is probably one of the biggest funders around cooperative work. Risk Management Agency is one we've been able to deal with some work around land retention. But for the most part, the lion's share of our resources come from agencies that focus on various types of programs, and those programs many times are geared towards individual farmers and landowners. But the nature of this organization is about the collective. And so trying to be creative, trying to figure out how do we deal with that piece, the mission of the organization, the core of the organization, what it was founded on, where the majority of our resources are coming from public sources and deal on the individual level. So that's the reason why many of our partners, all of our partners who give in what we call the unrestricted category are so valuable to us. No matter how small the donations, the contributions are, they go toward that piece that we call unrestricted that allows us to carry out the mission of the organization without those restrictions.
Of the 20,000 people, how many are African American, would you suggest?
The majority. The organization was founded by 22 African American cooperatives. However, we don't discriminate. We know that in our communities, all help is good help. And so there are some cooperatives that have some white, some Hispanic membership.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had cooperatives that have been primarily Hispanic cooperatives back in the late 60s, early 70s down in areas like Texas. But the majority, primarily, we work with African American farmers and landowners. But again, there are some other landowners and farmers who are part of the co-ops, and we welcome all support. We're about cooperatives.
So if somebody out there in the audience today wanted to give some money to the Federation, how would they do that?
Various ways. So one is directly through the website. Our website is www.federation.coop, C-O-O-P. You can go on the website, and there's an area where you can contribute to the organization through a link there and specify how you want that to be given. You can call directly into the office, and one of the ladies here, somebody will talk to you and send a form and give you ways to mail resources in. And you can always ask for the account and go directly into the account. But whatever's easiest for folks, so we try to pride ourselves on making it as easy as possible to contribute to our cause.
And so majority of the 20,000 people that you work with are African American. You're working in the South. And I had Doug O'Brien on the radio show last week from the White House.
Rural Policy Council.
The rural what?
The White House Rural Policy Council.
Yes. And he was telling me that of the areas that they're looking for helping children, and they have a ladder program, the White House does, to try to help people up. And he said that the places that have the most poverty, there 80% of them are in the rural areas, and most of them are people of color. And he mentioned the Delta and Appalachia are two of those areas, and the Delta being the area that you're working in. How do you help people get out of? Does this programs that you all do help people get out of poverty?
So let me say this first and foremost, which is very important. Yes, I'm very familiar with Doug. Doug O'Brien has been a great friend of the Federation. Prior to becoming to the Rural White House Policy Council, he was with Rural Development. So again, one of the agencies we work very closely with because of the nature.
Okay, now listen, we have to take a break. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're going to come back and find out what you're doing to help folks get out of poverty in the Delta, in the areas that you're talking about, working through co-ops. If anybody out there would like to have a question for Cornelius or myself, you can call in at 1-800-450-7876. Please don't touch the dial. We'll be right back.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.
You know, this is what makes WOL a great partner for this show, because their motto is information is power. And the National Cooperative Bank is sponsoring this program to give you the information so that if you put that information to use, you can get power. NCB's mission is to help cooperatives grow by supporting and being an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, placing special emphasis on serving the needs of communities that are economically challenged. And what we're talking to Cornelius Blanding about when we took the break was the economically challenged communities in the South and how cooperatives and the Federation of Southern Cooperatives are helping people come out of poverty. Welcome back, Cornelius, and could you continue with that conversation?
Yeah, for sure, and thanks. So Vernon, one of the things that I was going to say before I answered that question, which is important, and it goes back to I mentioned the partners. I mentioned Doug O'Brien in terms of being a friend of the Federation and the positions that he's been in, and rural development in general. But, you have the new Undersecretary that Lisa Mensa, and those folks have been very, very valuable partners, with the agencies that they work in. But here's the important part. I mentioned those 22 co-ops came together to form the Federation.
Mm-hmm.
The Federation is a cooperative. It's a cooperative of cooperatives. But more importantly, it was the people who came together to help themselves. And so our efforts are not about helping anybody. It's about people helping themselves. Those structures, those infrastructures that were created, ours in particular, in 1967, right after during the Civil Rights Movement, structures that were created for people to help themselves. And so I mention that because I think that's the most important part of this organization. It's the core. That's the crux of this organization, of the Federation. That it's an organization that's owned by the people themselves. It's a cooperative that's owned by the folks with benefits. And so our work in the Delta, Mississippi is, again, I mentioned in 1966, the conversations happened in Mississippi. Some of those co-ops that created the Federation came out of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Texas, so on and so on, Louisiana. But it's about people coming together to address their own problems and find solutions and partner with other folks, and especially the government, to help solve their own problems, to play roles and partner together. And in Mississippi, you mentioned Mississippi, and coincidentally, to have that high rate of poverty and have some of the richest agricultural land in the world is an oxymoron. And so how do we make sure people understand the power, the importance of agriculture, the power and importance of land? There shouldn't be anybody who owns land who should be in poverty. And so what the Federation is about, the land retention part is about, 1, retaining that land base, 2, utilizing it, and 3, organizing the cooperatives to get the full benefit of it, those economies of scale that's needed. So how do you look at community development in a full scale, look at all the pieces, and pull all those different partners who may be working on one separate piece, put them together, but put them together for the sake of doing real community-based development work, cooperative economic development work in which the folks can find their own solutions, partner with communities, partner with groups and foundations and organizations that are based in those communities, that are owned by those communities. The Federation was created in 1967. They created the structure. The structure was put together, and it acquired a lot of infrastructure, including land that's owned by those communities, those people, those cooperatives. And just having those creative partnerships are ways to work through that where people can address their own issues of poverty. But it's centered around how do you build, how do you recognize land as a value? How do you secure it? How do you get the secure land tenure? That's an important topic, so it can be passed on, so it can stay in agriculture, and so you can realize the value of agriculture, agricultural businesses, and cooperatives as a solution to help alleviate poverty. But people can do it themselves if they have the right structures in place and the support and the partnerships.
So you make a really interesting point here, which you got my total attention, because my question was, how do you help people come out of the poverty? And you turn around and said that people can help themselves come out of the poverty. You just created a structure. So how do you get people, how do you promote the Federation so that more and more people will know about it? You've gone from 22 to 75 co-ops to either help people create a co-op or help people to join the co-op so that you have people. Here's where I'm coming from. I had a gentleman on, Papa Sin from Senegal, and he said, similar to what you said, is that co-ops are formed to solve community problems. If you don't have a community problem, there's no need for a co-op. And he talked about how farmers, the key to it was that when they joined a co-op, one guy said he could not even provide for his family for the whole year. The benefit of being in a co-op was he could feed his family for the year, and he had some monies left over at the end of the year. He had some savings. And that was by joining the co-op and learning how to get good seed and learning better how to grow, use the land, and then having markets where they could sell it, a marketing co-op, so they could sell the products and get a better price for it. So there was a lot going on in that co-op to help this farmer. And so it's the same thing I'm trying to think of. How do you do that in your organization?
Well, Vernon, as you know, there's 7 principles, cooperative principles. And I think it's the 5th one. That's constant education. Education, education, education. Education is key. Education, getting the word out there so people understand cooperatives as an option, as a viable tool to help solve their own problems is one thing. Once people start organizing the co-ops, continue to provide that education so they understand how to actually manage and benefit from their co-op. Because, when you start talking about low-resource communities, you start talking about people who don't have the very thing that you asked about, education about these things, education about managing a business. And so there's a lot of factors that go into it, but it's all around education. Education, 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 and education at the right time and about the right things. So one, education about cooperatives so that they start understanding it's a viable tool. And once they get in it, constant education, understanding that co-op, understanding how to operate and manage that co-op as a business, and then how to expand that business, how to understand the co-op community, who else is out there, how do we partner together, which is, again, another cooperative principle. So I think the pieces are there if we follow them. And it's about the educational component and having the resources to do the education. All of it goes back to that piece that you so eloquently mentioned, money. How do you get the resources to do this work? It's how we have to partner together. The co-op community is so important. You mentioned NCBA as the sponsor here, and which is very important. The NCBA was created out of a charter by the government, recognizing the need in these rural communities and around the world. And so NCBA is a valuable partner because it is a resource tool for folks. But how do we put all those resources together and utilize them? Understand that we're all important, that we're all integral to the whole, and work together on things. And that's a challenge, though. But again, it's a challenge that and a struggle that I enjoy being in, and I know others do too. And how do we struggle together and create and to get to where we're trying to get to, where we're making sure that this vehicle is available to all to help themselves.
Well, I like to help themselves, and I love the education part. That's where I started loving this thing called a co-op. And so it's a great time to talk about what is a co-op. A co-op is any business you can think of. It can be a co-op. Any business whatsoever. Co-op could, if it's owned by the employees, it's called a worker co-op. If it's owned by the people that use the products and services, it's called a consumer co-op. Examples of consumer co-op is credit unions, which has already been mentioned, or housing co-ops. But any kind of business, daycare could be a worker co-op. But I've seen consulting firms, architectural firms, people in the healthcare industry could have a worker cooperative. So it could be any kind. But a lot of times in farmers, they come together to form purchasing co-ops where they buy gas. When Cornelius was on before, he said that they formed a worker co-op in, I think, the 50s, because when people went out to vote, to get the right to vote, then the whites would not sell them gasoline or sell them other things. So they had to form their own co-op and get a truck and go across the borders and buy their gas. So you get co-op, purchasing co-ops, and then also you get marketing co-ops when people come together to sell their products. And I hear mainly farmers and artists are doing this now. So there's all kinds of the different co-ops. And we're going to come back to the principles. You mentioned the 5th principle, and the 6th principle is cooperation among co-ops, so that networking and working together. And we have Gwen on the line. Gwen, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, I do. I understand the concept of the co-op, and it sounds terrific. Mm-hmm. Pardon me, but how does one get involved? You go to your credit union and say, I want to join a co-op. I want to live in a community where the dwellings are a part of a co-op. I haven't gotten yet what one must do to get involved with the co-op situation.
Well, National Cooperative Business Association try to put together a computer program where you could go and look, if you come into a community, you can say what housing co-ops are out there and have some available. But you could go to your credit union, and I'll look up. There's something you can go online. I think it's called asmarterchoice.coop.
Mm-hmm.
And you could go to that and look and see a credit union that you could join. NCBA.coop is another place you could go look on their webpage and see what they're having. You could look under co-op in DC. There's something called coopdc.org where people will go on and log on. And there's a Silver Spring food co-op. There's a Greenbelt food co-op. So there's a lot of different co-ops around if you want to join one.
Okay. Now, I'm actually calling because my grandson, who's 30 years old, is single, and he does have a little lump sum of money from a terrible accident he was in. And I was just thinking to help him mature some, to get involved with something like a co-op where living seems to be ideal because everybody's on the same page in terms of interest in the place where they live.
That's a great listen. We got to take a break. Gwen, please hang on. We'll be right back to talk about you and your grandson.
WOL.
Welcome back, everybody, this Thursday. Gwen is talking about her grandson. She wants to see if she can help him. Gwen, I was hoping you weren't asking me to help him figure out a wife or something over here.
No. Not yet.
Not yet.
Actually, he is single.
Okay.
And he works all the time. So he needs more of an interest in life than to just go back and forth to work.
That's one of the benefits of co-ops. Cornelius, do you have any ideas or suggestions for this lady?
Well, I want to. Well, good morning, Gwen, and
morning.
And thanks for your question. Is a $1 million question. How does one get involved? That's the crux of the issue, and that's the challenge that's always posed. And trying to figure out how to make sure. Going back to that question Vernon asked, how do you make sure the education is out there, the information is out there, so people know about cooperatives? Because in fact, if people pull the covers back, cooperatives are prominent. It touches everybody's lives, but many times we don't even know we're a part of cooperatives, and we don't know how to truly benefit from them. We don't know truly how to have that stake in them, understand that we're owners in it, and really understand. And that's the beauty of it. But getting to that information. So your question is one that's the crux of everything. It's that challenge. And as Vernon said, NCBA. I sit on the board of NCBA as representative part of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And that's one of the big challenges, figuring out how does NCBA become that one-stop shop, and how does it provide that information to people who are looking to get engaged with cooperatives. So I'll go back to Vernon's response to you. I think NCBA is one source to go to and find out and kind of see some co-ops in the areas. But the other thing I would say, having a conversation with your grandson about really what it is he wants to do, and going back to Vernon, what you said about Papa Sins, that if there's a problem, there's no cooperative, there's not a problem. Now, the way we look at it in the Federation, we talk about it in terms of need. Cooperatives come out of need. They're jointly owned and democratically controlled businesses that are owned by a group of people who've come together to meet a common need.
Yeah.
Who do he have something in common with in terms of his needs? He has to recognize that first, that he has a need. So, I think you should definitely constantly spend time talking, but when you spend time with folks, it's just helping to flesh out. But once he realizes that need that he has, he would probably know people who are in a similarly situated, who have a common need, and that's when that spark happens. Co-ops come from that need. Him really understanding that is the crux of this. Make sure that he understands what his need really is, and when he understands that, I think the power then starts to shine.
Well, sometimes those of us on the outside can see the need better than the person.
Absolutely.
Unless they are trusting of those of us who have a special love or interest in them, then, it's something that they may be persuaded to do or listen to. But just to have the wherewithal to just begin, it would take a push or some conversation to get that interest up.
Let me tell you, Gwen, a minute that there's a lady I met named Julia, and she decided she wanted to be in a co-op, and she just started getting the training. There's the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, and she would go to their conferences.
Yeah.
I suggest you go to ncba.coop. And there's a heading called Co-op Jobs. You can find a job or volunteer. So he needs to learn about co-ops.
Yeah.
Okay, and I would suggest this for everybody out there. If you learn about co-ops, I think most people will love them. As I did. I did not learn it through going to school. I found out by managing housing co-ops. And the more I learn about co-ops, the more I really like this model of business over the capitalistic model of a stockholder who may invest in your business but live in a different country even. But most co-ops are locally owned by the people that are there, and then they find out the need of the community. And so your son needs to figure out what Cornelius said is, what does he really want to do with his life, and what kinds of things that he want to accomplish or what's needed in your community that he lives in. And then find some other people, either through going to the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops or going to NCBA. And as he gets find a group of people, then it's learning how to put the business together.
Certainly.
And let me add something to you. And Gwen, I think I don't know. Are you in D.C.? Where are you?
Yes.
All right. Well,
the Washington metropolitan area. He's in Silver Spring, but close by. Works in D.C.
Well, I know it's quite a distance, but our annual meeting, the Federation of Southern Cooperatives annual meeting, is every year, third weekend of August. This year, August 13th through the 15th, and we do it every year. And the membership come together. So we will welcome you and anyone else who's interested in learning about cooperatives, and especially some community development cooperatives, and how it came out of the civil rights movement and the role it still plays in the lives of low-income communities, and especially in the South. We will welcome your participation and you bringing your son down to our annual meeting.
So, and to bring him down, where are the meetings held?
We start on Thursday in Birmingham, Alabama, which is probably one of the few places you can actually fly into. And then on Friday and Saturday, we go down to our training center. Our training center is in Epps, Alabama. And our director of program and operations, John Zippert, who was been with the Federation for all 48 years, likes to say that Epps is the center of the universe. So Epps, a little small town about 100 miles west of Birmingham.
Okay. Well, years and years ago, I was a member of the Cooperative Extension Service program, which is, in a way, it's sort of like that, but I'm told it's not at all connected. But the leadership training was similar. Of course, I was quite young back there. And I see likenesses in these different areas, but they're not connected, I understand.
Okay.
So it is something, though, that I think once a person realizes what a great program it is, who wouldn't want to be a party to that?
Well, that's the reason we're having this program. So I tell you what, Gwen, we're going to cut you off now because I want to get back to Cornelius, and we're going to talk more about the conference that he's bringing up.
Thank you.
And thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
Okay.
Enjoy your day.
Thank you, too, dear.
Goodbye. So,
Cornelius, let's talk about your conference because I am planning to be there on the 13th and the 5th through the 15th. And John Zipper, I was interested to find out he's from New York, but went to the South, and now he sounds Southern. You would have never known he was from New York. He has that Southern drawl that I used to have coming up in Bluefield, West Virginia. So the 13th you're starting. What are the kinds of things you do in the conference?
I'm glad you asked. So on the 13th, the 13th is the day we have our award ceremony, and that's where we honor somebody who's given a lifetime of achievement in social justice, economic justice, things in terms of benefiting the community, the world, the country, and the world. It's called the Estelle Witherspoon Lifetime Achievement Award, and it's I think 14th annual Estelle Witherspoon Achievement Award, and the 48th annual meeting. On Thursday, again, we honor somebody, and our past recipients have been, the very first recipient was actually Danny Glover. Danny Glover, Harry Belafonte, Senator Hank Sanders, who's our very own down in Alabama, who's done Representative Benny Thompson, and your representative there, Ms. Eleanor Holmes Norton, was the last year's recipient. So we honor folks during that time, get together and honor those folks who've done a lifetime achievement, but more, and we also honor them in the name of Estelle Witherspoon, who was one of the pioneers of the Federation. She was one of those co-ops, the Freedom Quilting Bee, and was one of the founders, was in the room when the Federation was founded. The Freedom Quilting Bee was one of those co-ops that was created, again, out of need, back in Alabama, Alberta, Alabama, Wilcox County, the poorest county, I think, in the country. But then in Alabama, and these women were the wives of sharecroppers and had jobs and things, and they one of the first groups that invited Dr. Martin Luther King down. But after people started registering to vote, these women started losing their jobs because they formed the Quilting Bee. And as a matter of fact, there's some of the products from the Quilting Bee that are there at the Smithsonian. So, but Ms. Estelle Witherspoon, who again was one of the organizing pieces of that cooperative and also of the civil rights movement back then, and it's named for her. So we honor her while we're honoring somebody who's given a lifetime of achievement on Thursday. And we have a visit over the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, right across from the church where the 4 little girls were bombed, where the church was bombed and 4 little girls lost their lives. So it's a historical time for us. We leave there.
Wait, before you go on, I just want to make sure I get this, because Estelle Witherspoon and the Quilting Bee, are they still in existence?
The Quilting Bee is. Estelle Witherspoon is passed.
Okay.
But the Quilting Bee is. And it's a struggle trying to maintain the Quilting Bee. There's been some fragmentation. There'll be a lot of different issues in the community. And you'll hear a lot more about it when you're down, Vernon. Get a chance to see some of her family members, her daughter and son-in-law and stuff are present during the event. So you get a chance to learn more about her and the Freedom Quilting Bee and some of the problems they've had. But like many other co-ops, they have challenges to try to maintain. Any business
has, they got to have the challenge that it wouldn't be businesses. But listen, can you buy the quilts now?
Yes, they still, and I get you connected down there. When you come down, we might be able to get you one.
No, I want to buy one. I don't want you to get me one. I really want to buy one. And also, it gets cold up here in D.C. in the wintertime. So there might be some other people out there that want to buy some quilts. They're beautiful, and there's history. As a matter of fact, we did a quilt at my church, and we taught the kids mathematics by doing the quilts, squares and rectangles and triangles, and measuring them out. And it was a math science learning center. So we had them to do a quilt, and in doing that quilt, we taught them mathematics.
That's an interesting point, man. So when you're down, I'd definitely like to connect you with some of our folks in our office, the staff who works with some of the folks over at the Quilting Bee, and if anybody from the Quilting Bee is there, then we can talk, because that's another angle on it, because you always got to try to find how do you expand those businesses, how do you add other components, and this educational piece that you talk about is something that would be very interesting.
Okay, there might be some people out there. We need to figure out how to get numbers or web pages so people can order quilts or.
So what I do is I promise, I'm sorry I don't have this information on you now. Like right now, I'm just going to direct you to the Federation's website. But I promise I would love to come on the show another time, and maybe we can have somebody else on from the Quilting Bee, and we can talk about that and get the information where they can directly buy it. And now let me point people to our website, and then we'll make sure we get folks connected.
And that website is federation.coop?
Yes, sir. Federation.coop. www.federation.coop.
Okay. So that's
Thursday.
The 13th on Thursday. Okay, so now we're going to Friday, and we're going to go down to Epps on
Friday. You go down to Epps on Friday and Saturday. And so we start off on Friday where we're bringing, and again, it's a celebration because it's a time for those co-op members that are on the Federation to come together and start talking amongst themselves. But Friday is a big time where we have a big resource panel with many USDA officials, high-ranking officials from USDA coming in to talk about the partnership between the Federation and those agencies within USDA, within the government, and what resources are available. And we get they get a chance to hear back from our membership, talking about some of the challenges, what their thoughts are. So it's a two-way piece of communication street there, which has always been beautiful. Everybody from, and we mentioned Doug O'Brien. Doug O'Brien was down when he was acting under Secretary for Rural Development. Somebody from Rural Development is a big sponsor every year, and they're going to be down, a partner rather, and they'll be down this year as well. Hoping we'll have the Undersecretary Lisa Minster there. Not somebody who she appoints, but we have people from NRCS, from
Well, Lisa Mensa will be on the show next week.
Oh, well, so I definitely bring it up, and she may bring it up, but she's been a great partner of the organization as head of USD of Rural Development.
Let me stop you a minute because we've got to take another break. But I heard her speak at a rural summit, and I want to talk to you about when we get back. We don't have we're in our last segment already, Cornelius. Okay, but we only have one more segment. If anybody out there would like to call in, you can call in at 1-800-450-7876, as Gwen did. If you have any question or comment, please call in at 1-800-450-7876. We're going to go take a break for the weather and the news, traffic, and then we'll be right back.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.
Information is power. I was at a rural summit that the National Rural Electric Cooperative had here in D.C., and one of the things that came out of that summit was that there are a lot of hospitals in rural America that are going under. They're going out of business. Do you know about that, and have you ever looked at maybe trying to take those ones that are going out of business and make them into co-ops?
You say the hospitals.
Hospitals.
That's an interesting point you have. You mentioned John Zippert, our Director of Programs and Operations. John is on the board of one of the local hospitals, the community hospitals down in Alabama, and that's an issue they deal with regularly, and how it's affected, because it has major challenges. So that is some. As an organization, we haven't necessarily focused on it, but some of our staff, folks like John Zippert and all. Our staff, our board, our membership, they play important roles because they're part of other boards in the community, and it connects the community. So those are some issues that we're dealing with indirectly now. But we've dealt with that issue directly back in the 60s and 70s, where we had one of the first community health centers in the South, put right outside in Epps, Alabama, not far from our training center. And while you're there, I want to take you over there to see that. And the challenge was putting that there and having local doctors and nurses work there, but more importantly, bringing folks in where they could tend to the needs of the folks in the community. But it was such a challenge dealing in that era where they ended up shutting the health center down because we weren't licensed to run this kind of facility when we were only trying to meet needs. Mm-hmm. People had organized to meet their own needs and their healthcare needs at that particular instance. So that's an issue that's been important to us because, again, when you deal in the community, you have to deal with all particular needs, all different areas. And so it's something that we've always been interested in directly until things were till we were shut down in that arena, but indirectly now, and that's through the piece that co-ops are so good at, providing that leadership. But people who become members of co-ops, they then get more engaged in their communities. They start running for seats on whether it's education, health, or whatever it is, and connect the community from all those different pieces. That's true community development.
Well, I've heard that a lot, no matter where it is in the world. Going back to Papa Sin in Senegal, he said that the people that came out of the co-op would end up being city council members, Board of Education members, because they understood both in order to solve community problems that they have to be engaged, and then they have to be informed, get the knowledge, get the education. And so it just takes work. You have to be engaged to get stuff done. And so people then not only would become board members of co-ops, but they would go out into the community and help to structure solutions to the problems that were there.
And it's exactly like that in the South, where in the communities where we work. So
Thursday, you're in Epps, and then Friday, what kind of classes do you have? I assume you have a lot because education is so important.
Yes. So on Friday, again, we have the resource panel. Again, everybody from Rural Development, NRCS, FSA, the Farm Service Agency, to APHIS, Animal Plant Health Inspection Services, NAS, to do the agricultural statistics, so risk management, all the different agencies of the government, we have them under one roof, talking about those programs and starting to talk about how even those programs have to be cooperatively ran. They have to work together in order to best fill the needs of our members, at least, but I'm sure of everybody, their constituents. So we structured in that way. We also do an update on whatever's going on for around the world right then. Right now, there's a big settlement that's going on, and so we're having an update around that. In past, we've had big updates on the lawsuit that was going on. We also deal with training around co-op development, land retention, the things I mentioned cooperatives, looking at cooperative marketing, where some of the cooperatives work together, look at what are the opportunities and how do they work together, cooperation among cooperatives. Land retention, we have what we call free wheels clinic. So where we look at estate planning, wheels and estate planning and wheels to deal with that land retention issue. So folks understand how to secure that land base, how to develop a will, how to structure into a family corporation or family land trust, or whatever the case may be, and have attorneys. We partner a lot with some of the universities. Southern University as one example. We got a program with Southern University that's been going on for years where we get legal interns. We have legal students come there, and they're housed there at our training center in Epps now. And they go and they get a good grasp of the issue of heirs property in our community. Mm-hmm. The problem that heirs property causes and how people lose their land. And they start helping to solve it. They work with us in these wheels clinics. And more importantly, whether they stay in this environment or not, they become friends and allies. One of the things that we've done is we put together a network of attorneys all around the South of people who understand the issue, and most of them understand it because they've even served as legal interns or our attorney on staff go in and train and work with them to understand the issue and how do we look at it. We did a study that was commissioned by Congress and paid for by the U.S. government 35 years ago, back in 1980, that talked about the land tenure in the South and how to secure, looking around the South with black land ownership and what that problem was and what the land tenure situation looked like around the South. And that's a study that's still relevant today. The Secretary of Agriculture has put together a commission looking at those same things, looking at land tenure and how does that play a role in bringing beginning farmers in. So, again, this cooperative movement is connected in so many ways, just really putting your hands around and understanding it and how we all work together cooperatively to solve these problems and how we work together cooperatively in terms of helping people who are helping themselves. How do we all work hand in hand? Because we all play a role. Because at the end of the day, it affects us all. Mm-hmm. When we lose agricultural land in this country, it's going to affect the soil, water, and air. The main thing that some of the agencies, NRCS, the agency in the government set up to protect, it's going to affect that. And it's not a black problem, a white problem, a Hispanic problem. It's an American problem. It's a world problem. And cooperatives are set up to help solve those problems on a very local level with people starting to be educated to understand, like Gwen asked, being able to understand what their needs are. Our job is to play the role in facilitating those conversations. People are smart. They'll get it. Just facilitate that. When they understand their need, a cooperative is born.
Listen, do you ever – I hear you talk about land retention, but do you ever have an occasion where there's the land available to buy? Get land?
There is. And so and let me speak from example of heirs property. And so people know heirs property is when someone, the landowner passes and doesn't have a will or a plan, and he goes down and the land passes to the heirs, what they call the heirs, no matter how many they are. And as generations grow, the land is further fragmented, creating a problem because there's no clear ownership, there's no clear title. And so it's not a marketable title, what they call it. So it's hard to use it as collateral, hard to get access to some of the programs with USDA and all the increased income. So it's a host of problems that heirs property creates. But what the worst case scenario is when somebody comes in and there's a forced sale, what they call a partition sale on that land. And usually there's developers who come in and buy that land. So you lose it. So you lose an heir's property to development. And so what the ideal situation for us is to create situations where those heirs, because usually there's an heir who's interested in continuing to farm the land, keeping it in agriculture, and sometimes who's a part of these co-ops. So trying to help them maintain is our first source. But in cases when we can't do that, what we try to do is put it in a position where we had what we call the revolving loan fund that was centered around that, where we would try to purchase it and hold on to it if the family wanted to get it back or sell it to someone who had an agricultural interest. Fortunately, it's hard to maintain these revolving loan funds, so we need things like that. But we're advocating for even the government to set up these programs where they can create these loan funds to buy this land, to keep it in agriculture, to sell it out. That solves that beginning farmers problem, where beginning farmers are the biggest problem is having access to agricultural land, affordable agricultural land. So these kind of things are avenues, are opportunities for other people to buy land in the case when the heirs aren't available or can't get it. and our second route is to make sure it stays in agriculture. But we do have those situations. But that's another common problem, Vernon, trying to figure out how to identify land that's in agriculture and keep it in agriculture and make sure you even, if it's going to be sold, that it's sold to somebody who's interested in agriculture.
Got it. On the 14th, either 13th or 14th, do you have any classes on things like budgeting or finances?
We do different classes around co-op development, sometimes around co-op financing, sometimes around co-op management, sometimes just around co-op 101. What is a co-op and how do you operate your co-op? Sometimes around co-op marketing. I think this time it's around cooperative marketing, but we do. And more importantly, one thing that we do at the Federation, there's something that we're in partner with the Southern Grassroots Economy Project and other folks where we hold what we call Co-op Econ every year in October at our training center in F, Alabama. And we talk about all those issues then, from Co-op 101 to co-op budgeting, co-op financing, co-op governance, every single thing. And so it's just a matter of what you're interested in. And that's a 2-day conference, we call it, again, Co-op Econ. So we do a number of things. We have limited time, of course, at the annual meeting, so we try to cover different things every different year based on what we're hearing on the ground and based on what our membership has requested. But I know this year it'll be around cooperative marketing as one piece. Listen,
Cornelius, we only have a couple more minutes to go. You have anything that you pressing on you that you want to tell people?
Yeah, I do. And let me first finish by saying that Saturday. Saturday is the important part of our meeting where the membership we have. It's the membership meeting, where the membership meet the people who actually own these co-ops, who actually own the Federation, where they're meeting and they're talking about their needs and what they want to do and how to move forward, and they direct me as their executive director and my staff in terms of what exactly needs to be done and what we're going to do, and then we translate that and talk about how we're going to do it and who do we need to partner with and how do we build our partnerships. So that's the important part for us, and we have what we call cooperative caucuses, where the co-ops in each different state, the state caucuses, where those co-ops in all the different states, and they caucus as a state, and they speak with one voice from each different state, and those different states make up the Federation. So that's the crux of the Federation on that Saturday, and you see it at work. But I like to just end with that and just talk about in terms of really how important it is for these partnerships. And again, the sponsor of this show, NCB, which is a valuable tool around the resource part of it, the capitalization of co-ops and communities. But every other key piece, the partnerships, whether it be the government, whether it be the banks, whether it be the cooperative community, the co-op developers, the cooperative themselves, and the communities, all of it is important. All of it has to work together, and it starts around education. Education, which culminates to fleshing out that need. Once you get that need, you got the spark for a co-op, and a co-op can help people solve their problems and address the needs of the community. And like you said, it's about the community being involved and owning those structures.
Thank you, buddy.
Infrastructure.
It's a pleasure, always a pleasure, and I'll be talking to you and see you in a month.
Vernon, I ought to start paying you to have me on this
show. Okay. You take good care. Have a great time, a great weekend, and we'll see everybody next Thursday.
Vernon, thanks for all you do, man.
Thank you, babe.
All right.
Bye-bye.
1450 WOL.